When people hear the name Calvin Klein, they think of the clothes. Do the clothes deserve all the credit?
Not alone. 5 people made the name mean more than the things we sold.
Brooke Shields, Wahlberg took underwear out of private life and made it a public statement. Kate Moss replaced polished perfection with something far more unsettling: vulnerability. Christy Turlington gave the brand something controversy never could: memory.
And the 5th person never modeled for me at all. She began behind a store counter. Years later, she would embody the Calvin Klein idea more completely than any advertisement we ever made.
People often describe my work as simple, but simplicity leaves nowhere to hide. The proportion has to be right, and the person has to supply the life. The final woman on this list understood that so completely that she eventually no longer needed the frame or the label. To explain why I place her above 4 of the most famous faces in fashion, we have to begin in 1980, with a 15-year-old girl and a commercial some broadcasters refused to air.
Did the controversy matter more than the jeans?
With Brooke, the two became impossible to separate. Richard Avedon photographed and directed the Calvin Klein jeans campaign in 1980. There was no elaborate set fighting for attention, only Brooke, the denim, the camera, and language provocative enough to make the audience supply its own meaning. The response came immediately. Some broadcasters refused the commercials. Critics argued over whether the campaign was clever, inappropriate, or both. People who had never discussed designer denim were suddenly discussing ours. That taught me something uncomfortable about images. Once you release one, it stops belonging entirely to you. The audience brings its fears, desires, and assumptions, and those reactions attach themselves to the picture. Americans already understood blue jeans. What changed was the emotional temperature. They became intimate, youthful, rebellious, and difficult to ignore. Brooke could carry those contradictions because her face contained 2 ideas at once: composure and extreme youth. Looking back, does her age change how you see the campaign? It has to. Brooke has spoken about how young she was and how differently the adults around her interpreted the material. The history cannot be told honestly without that discomfort. I would never reduce what happened to a clever slogan or a sales figure. But the creative lesson stayed with me. Restraint does not always produce quiet. Sometimes removing everything unnecessary makes the remaining idea louder. Brooke showed that one person could turn a familiar garment into a cultural event.
The next person took something people concealed beneath their clothes and made it the most visible expression of confidence they owned.
Mark Wahlberg was unpredictable and surrounded by headlines. Why take that risk?
The risk was the reason. In 1992, most people still knew him as Marky Mark. He came from music rather than polished fashion, and he carried a physical confidence that could not be made polite without destroying it. Herb Ritz photographed him in black and white, wearing little more than low jeans and white briefs. Mark did not look like a man asking permission to be there. That changed the balance of the image. The underwear was visible, but it was not the hero. His attitude was. Men could look at those pictures and imagine borrowing some of that confidence by buying the same basic thing. That is the real mechanism of fashion advertising. You do not sell cotton by describing cotton. You connect an emotion to the object until the product feels like evidence of the person the customer might become. A cautious campaign would have softened Mark. We kept the rawness. Soon, the waistband rising above a pair of jeans became a code copied on streets, in music videos, and in the campaigns that followed. Men's underwear no longer lived entirely in private. It entered pop culture.
Brooke had shown me that restraint could provoke a reaction. Mark proved it could create a persona.
But confidence was only one version of modernity. At that moment, fashion was celebrating women who appeared monumental, glamorous, athletic, and almost untouchable. The next person represented the opposite. She did not dominate the picture. She made people move closer to it. And that quiet difference helped break open an entire decade.
Were you deliberately trying to replace the supermodel?
No, I was trying to escape repetition. The great supermodels were powerful, sculpted, and instantly recognizable. But when every image pursues the same form of perfection, perfection stops surprising anyone. Patrick Demarchelier believed Kate matched the direction I was searching for. She was smaller, less constructed, and more elusive than the reigning ideal. She did not overwhelm the clothes. She created curiosity around them. Kate appeared with Mark in the 1992 campaign, but her most revealing collaboration came through Mario Sorrenti, her boyfriend and a young photographer. His private photographs of her did not resemble conventional advertising. They felt intimate, imperfect, and emotionally exposed. At the time, obsession needed new energy. Those photographs suggested a solution. Instead of building desire on a crowded set, Mario and Kate went away together and photographed the intimacy that already existed between them. The result contained beauty and discomfort in the same frame. The viewer sensed a relationship rather than a pose, which made the pictures difficult to dismiss.
The campaign was also criticized. Did the provocation go too far?
Some of that criticism belonged in the conversation. People challenged the body ideal and the darkness surrounding the imagery. Impact does not erase responsibility, and controversy does not automatically prove that a creative decision was right. What Kate taught me was not that one kind of body should replace another. She showed me how a familiar ideal can become a cage. A designer has to notice when beauty is merely being repeated instead of rediscovered. Kate gave the brand youth, ambiguity, and a new kind of sensuality. She proved that the camera did not always need polish. Sometimes it needed proximity. But a company cannot survive forever on disruption. Shock can win attention once. It cannot by itself make people believe in a brand for decades. And this is where the chronology matters. The next chapter in this story did not happen after Kate. It had already begun 4 years earlier. Before Mark and Kate transformed the image in 1992, Christy Turlington had become the face of eternity in 1988. I place her here because she answers the question disruption leaves behind. Once you have attention, how do you make it last?
So, Christy came before Mark and Kate. Why tell her story now?
Because chronology explains when a campaign happened. Contrast explains why it mattered. Christy began working with us while she was still in her teens. In 1988, at 19, she signed an exclusive contract and became the face of the first Eternity campaign. She was the clearest expression of the woman I imagined for the clothes. Intelligent, composed, physically beautiful, but never limited to appearance. Eternity came from an idea larger than novelty: love, family, and life continuing beyond a single moment. Christy gave that promise a face without appearing frozen in time. Christy could do that. Her beauty was undeniable, but there was calm and character behind it. She could make a clean shirt or a close portrait feel sensual without forcing sensuality on the viewer. The image had room to breathe.
Fashion depends on novelty. Why keep returning to her?
Because constant replacement has a cost. If a house changes faces, photographers, and visual language every season, the audience may remember the novelty while forgetting who created it. I wanted a thread people could recognize even as the products and decades changed. Christy provided that thread. The public watched her mature, so the imagery accumulated history. When she returned for new Eternity campaigns decades later, the photographs were new, but the recognition was already there. Time had strengthened their meaning rather than erased it. That changed my understanding of reputation. A brand is not built by one brilliant surprise. It is built when choices made across years appear to come from the same mind. Christy did not follow the disruption of 1992, she surrounded it. Her relationship with the brand began before Mark and Kate and endured long after. Brooke brought confrontation. Mark brought attitude. Kate brought rupture. Christy made those moments feel as if they belonged to a house with a memory. For all four, the public encountered the Calvin Klein idea through a constructed image. The person who understood the idea most completely worked behind the image, knew the customer, and became a style reference precisely because she never appeared to want the role.
Why place an employee who never modeled for you above Brooke Shields, Kate Moss, and Christy Turlington?
Because Carolyn proved that the idea could survive without the advertisement. After graduating from Boston University, she entered the company through retail. She moved from selling clothes near Boston to handling important clients in New York, then advanced through public relations and show production. Her career depended on understanding people, what genuinely suited them, what they wanted before they could articulate it, and what they would reject the instant it felt false. Carolyn could recognize what looked current before it became obvious. Accounts from inside the company credit her with advocating for Kate's casting in 1992. Taste is usually remembered only after it reaches a billboard. Carolyn's influence began earlier, in the private moment when someone had to recognize the right face. Then, the public discovered Carolyn herself. She wore narrow black coats, straight jeans, men's shirts, simple knits, loafers, and almost no decoration. None of those pieces was revolutionary. Her editing was. She seemed to know the exact moment an outfit was complete. After she married John F. Kennedy Jr., every public entrance became news. Still, she never dressed to feed the spectacle surrounding her. Even her fluid, unembellished wedding dress by Narciso Rodriguez refused the costume people expected from an American dynasty. That restraint made her more compelling, not less. There is a painful irony in Carolyn becoming an enduring icon. She valued privacy but lived under relentless attention, leaving Calvin Klein in 1996 as her private life became public property. I do not admire the intrusion that produced so many of the photographs people study today. I admire what remained visible despite it: discernment. Carolyn absorbed the principles associated with the company: clean lines, neutrality, sensuality without excess, and made them entirely her own. She did not resemble an advertisement. She looked like someone who had understood the idea so deeply that she no longer needed to display the label. That is the highest form of influence a designer can hope for. The clothing recedes and the individual remains. Once I understood that, the question of who made Calvin Klein had a very different answer.
So who made Calvin Klein? You or them?
That is the wrong division. I could create the objects and choose the frame. They supplied what design alone could not. Brooke turned a product into an event. Mark transformed it into a persona. Kate challenged the ideal. Christy gave the image memory. Carolyn carried the idea beyond the image and made it instinctive. That is how a fashion brand becomes part of culture. It begins with something people can buy. It grows through an image people desire. But it lasts only when people take the idea away, adapt it, and make it their own. No designer accomplishes that alone. I spent my career removing whatever stood between the eye and the person. Unnecessary detail, unnecessary explanation, anything that asked the clothing to perform too loudly. But subtraction works only when something truthful remains. Brooke supplied composure under scrutiny. Mark refused to be polished into safety. Kate exposed vulnerability. Christy brought steadiness. Carolyn brought judgment. They taught me that clothing cannot manufacture identity. It can sharpen identity, frame it, and give it a surface the world recognizes. The wearer still has to provide the life.
Perhaps that is why the simplest clothes are often the hardest to forget. There is less standing between us and the human being.
If you enjoyed hearing fashion history through the people who shaped it, subscribe. And tell me in the comments, who defined Calvin Klein more, Kate Moss or Carolyn Bessette-Kennedy?